Economic Development Committee in the Senate, Senator Frank Ginn, who has brought a provision to us to look at over the summer. He wants to drop legislation next year and wants our feedback before he drops the legislation. But his thought is, in law, we've already piecemealed some certain situations where we allow people to breach their covenant or allow people to remain in the covenant when they're doing certain types of businesses that really maybe aren't agricultural businesses. For example, if somebody places a cell tower on the property, the Cooper property, they're allowed to carve out the cell tower in the 5 acres without breaching their covenant. That's under current law today. Another example is people can have farm weddings, they can corn mazes, fishing for where people pay to come fish. They can do all of those kinds of things today under current law without breaching their CUVA covenant. And so, and there's a lot of others. You know, this year we had a provision to allow solar panels on CUVA property without breaching the covenant. That bill did fail. But every year there's more and more of this, what about this, what about that? This is economic development. And I'll use the solar panel example because that was being pitched at, you know, this is a lot of revenue for your rural counties. If they can get one of these solar panel farms, just the personal property taxes alone off the solar panel farm are to their benefit, and they should want that project, even if it means somebody breaching their covenant. So Senator Ginn wants us to look at when is it appropriate to basically allow somebody out of their covenant for an economic development type project. And the idea is for the county commissioners, you all benefit because of the increased tax base from that economic development project. In fact, I think there's some areas of the state where they're looking at some big manufacturing operations going in on what has been conservation use property that's in that 10-year covenant. Of course, some of you will say that, well, if it's that big of a project, why can't they just pay the penalty? It's not, you know, for that size project, the penalty may not mean a lot. So I don't know where that breaking point is when the penalty is a deterrent for moving forward on the project and when it's not a deterrent. But the senator would like for us to look at some local control mechanism where you all locally could sort of make some of those decisions and allow people out of the covenant if you deem it economic development worthy. And of course, my thought is you also have to look at what kind of political pressure does that put on you all locally if you're picking and choosing who gets out of their covenant. I can see a whole lot of politics around that. But I wanted just to open the floor up now for you all to give us just some of your general reaction to this. How do you feel about giving some more local authority to allow for breaches without penalty when it's a breach that's for the good of the community because you're getting a big economic development project to come in there and locate on that land?
There'd be no uniformity between the county on exemptions if everyone did their own.
No uniformity on exemptions. So what one county deems economic development, another county would not deem it economic development.
It seems that in a roundabout way we're opposed to so many exemptions for sales tax and all these other things, but then are we going to be a proponent for exemptions for this on and on?
It'll be hard to say no for the Board of Commissioners when somebody comes in and with a good project and says, I want to keep my CUVA, but I still want to do this economic development project. That'll put pressure, just like you were saying. The General Assembly can't say no to exemptions in the tax code. It'll be hard for the Board of Commissioners to say no to somebody. Then you got the problem of somebody else is in the covenant and they don't get that same break, and then the whole system will fall apart.
There are already provisions to breach the contract, and this sets up opportunities for good old boy at state and community level across the state.
Yeah, right now you can breach with penalty. You pay 2 times the tax savings is the penalty.
And enough deal,
That's
somebody
something,
can afford to pay it.
But is that for the entire track, or just for that particular track that's going to be going to some manufacturing or business?
So the question is that for the entire track, because some of these tracks are hundreds of acres, or is it just for the site, for the project,
For the breach?
for the breach? I will tell you, based on my conversations with the senator, he's thinking it would be done in 10-acre increments, and it would closely mirror the site of the project. So it would not be the entire covenant. He would not allow, say, if they had 1,000 acres in the program, and all 1,000 acres was on the same tract of property, to breach the entire 1,000 acres. It would only be what's necessary for the project.
Clint, it's something we need to be careful with. I wouldn't open ourselves up to more problems at the local government level. I think it's gonna be hard to just say no if they come in before your board of commissioners and say, but we're bringing this $100 million company in here. We, got a 150-acre solar farm in Walton County. They were 9 years in on the, Cooper, and the, property owner refused to pay the, back taxes that he owed, so the solar farm owners came to the board of commissioners and tax office, and they paid it because they didn't want about the black eye on what they're doing. And so, I mean, it's there for a reason. I mean, you're doing this to avoid paying property taxes. If you don't have a big windfall, somebody's gonna make money down the road. At the ultimate end, your local taxpayer is gonna lose out if we waive this and give it away. That's just my opinion. They should have been paying it all along, but it wasn't through the formula. They just had it sitting there marketing.
Dan?
Well, it's gonna be an extra heavy hit on more metro counties because you take a Cooper Bay, say it's $500 an acre, but without that, it might be $25,000 an acre versus South Georgia where it's truly an agricultural area where it's $500 an acre, but if you take it off, it may only be worth now $1,000 an acre. So this would really impact metro areas and not necessarily Atlanta. It could be around Macon, it could be around Valdosta, any metro area where property is along expressways that are sitting there with some pretty high values, and it could be a lot of tax money surrendered in allowing this to go through.
What would be the difference between doing this and giving an abatement to, let's say, a Walmart or a Target?
Basically, in a sense, is another type of incentive, if you will, or abatement. Y'all do Freeport is another example, what you do right now with Freeport. Of course, that requires a referendum. The abatements, require going through your development authority. This would be another type of incentive.
One of the questions I look at is that right now the law is uniform across the whole state of Georgia, and this is not putting a county pitted against another county because they're going to come in and say, look, we're going to move to your county, but guess what? This county next door here has already offered to waive all of these super penalties. Are you guys going to do that? And that could be a deal breaker. Right now, it's not even a question. They know if they move into either one of these counties, somebody's got to pay that super penalty. Usually, this is a small amount compared to a $100 million project, $10,000 to $15,000 in back taxes. This really, I think we're giving stuff away once again that we really don't need to be giving away.
I think Steve's absolutely right.
I agree.
There's the fact, we have 61% of our land mass in my county is in Cooper. And I think they've enjoyed it, and I'm all for the tax break that they're getting as far as that's concerned today. I don't think you need to go any further with that.
I agree.
Is there any interest in maybe meeting with Senator Ginn to discuss it, or is it a definite no?
I'd like to encourage this committee to at least sit down with them. Maybe if some certain members of this committee be willing to sit down with the senator and have a discussion, I think it'd be good. Yeah, I think he needs to.
Rather than just say no.
Right, because we're going to have to deal with him at the legislature anyway, so if we could get
Discussion, yeah.
some volunteers that would meet with
And
him.
he may have other
Melvin?
senators to.
Especially in
discuss it.
especially in his district.
He's
He's you're close.
So I don't mind, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay,
Some other folks, not me, myself.
sure. What,
I think the counties that have this issue would be good too, for the
So I
committee.
got Melvin and Kevin. Anybody else?
I will.
Okay. Brittany?
Wouldn't that just be from your large counties?
Well, the farm.
I think it affects a lot of the rural counties
Yeah.
as well, though,
Well, I
because
know,
we
like,
have more
we're-
property that's under
Like,
code.
we're a rural county, a very small rural county, so it doesn't affect us as much as it does for the
Yeah.
rest of these guys.
I think the three of,
Would you?
anybody else want to volunteer? You do? Okay. So the four of y'all, Clint, do you want to arrange that with Senator Ginn?
I will.
or-
I'll arrange it. Do we need to, would you like to have anybody there from the Assessors Association, or just, it's up to y'all? Would you- President maybe of Assessors? He's not here. Okay. Steve, we could get your president maybe to join? No? Okay.
And he'll probably have his from, he'll probably have his assessor from Franklin.
Yeah, yeah.
And if he has anybody else in the legislature that's co-sponsoring, or
Not yet that I know of.
he done?
Yeah, the question was, is there any identified co-sponsors of the legislation? He's just really wanting to get behind the scenes feedback before he moves forward with it. So I applaud him for at least reaching out to us ahead of time, which is more than a lot of legislators do, and seeking our feedback. So.
Okay. Thank y'all.
The next item on our agenda is listed as widow supplement. It's also called year support. There's a handout in your side pocket. I want to thank Sean Adams on our staff for putting this together. It gives you some background on this issue. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to review this. From my understanding, what's going on, and this is being pushed by some attorneys across the state, this was a law that was passed back during the Civil War. And the idea there was, you know, with all the people that were dying on the battlefield, people were losing their properties back home because the widow could not pay the property taxes, and they were taking the property. So this was a way to make sure that people were not losing their property. However, today it's being used in some situations where there's a death and the spouse is able to use this to forego any property taxes on that property. And it's not just residential, it's commercial property too, and there's no value cap on it for a year. And so the question is, should this still be on the books? And if it should there be at least some restrictions on it? I know we've got the tax commissioners here with us today, and they're much more familiar than I am with it. It was brought to my attention, though, by one of our county commissioners in one of our more rural counties, who apparently they're having a lot of property taxes being exempt because of an attorney really pushing this in their area. They've had a number of property taxes that they couldn't collect because of this. Dan, do you want to maybe speak to the group a little bit about this issue, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it was come to Gato's attention also that it appears to us to be, an abuse when commercial property, production property is being, and vacation property. I have a good example in Wilkes County, city of Signal. That's a very small city, and they've got a vacation home down there that's it's got tennis courts, swimming pool, stables, whatnot on it. The owner is in Fulton County, but she has included that in her year support. My mind is, why should her recreation home be part of the year support? That's certainly not needed to help her live. And so there's a lot of examples of that. Now, I've had commercial property in Rockdale, when I was tax commissioner, that from people who didn't even live in Rockdale County got that included in the year support. I had to write off, send some $10,000 tax bills off of commercial property. And so we felt like it has nowadays has lost its intent, and it's become a nice loophole, and can be pretty lucrative to let the people who can afford to pay these taxes.
How many of y'all have heard of this issue? I didn't really even know about it until.
My feeling on this thing is, I'd like to see the whole thing eliminated if we can, but if we can't, it'd be restricted to the residents only.
Homesteaded property?
Homesteaded property, only.
Any value limit on the homestead property? Doesn't matter.
No, doesn't matter.
If they've got homestead exemption, I think that's what the intent was, is that you wouldn't lose your home because there's a death in the family, but not to let them use this as a loophole to get
But this-
commercial property.
When this was written, situations like we talked about, they didn't even exist. So we need down just to, take those are the ones where you allow your residents only, homestead exemption.
Would you, state any kind of acreage limitation, because if your homesteaded house is on 100 acres,
I guess you have it on non-income producing property.
That's a good point. They could have 100 acres, but if it's not producing anything.
Yeah.
Well, how do you determine that? I mean, if it's standing there for a number of years, it may not in 12 months, but
Like timber.
non-income producing, it's growing timber, it's growing something.
Yeah.
So it's producing income. It may not be this year, but it may be in years to come. So
And if it's under Cuba, it doesn't have much taxes on it anyway.
That's right.
I think the tax commissioners are probably gonna recommend homestead property.
Consider property.
That's a simple way of doing it.
yeah, keep it simple.
Well, I'll go ahead and draft up a statement that reflects that for the committee to consider at the next meeting, but we can always obviously modify it at the next meeting. You'll have time to think about it. John, did you have?
The only thing quickly I was going to add regarding the income producing aspect of it is in the law to where the widow or widower in this case now would have to show that their expenditures exceed the income. So if there's any income producing property that's producing more income than what the value of the property is, the tax is on the property, they wouldn't be able to set it aside anyway based on the law. If there aren't any objections put before them, then there's a chance they can get it set aside. But as long as there's no action on the income producing property, if that income is significant enough, then it would preempt it anyway.
But my guess is a lot of people don't know about this and don't come there to object. So it goes right on through.
Exactly.
And my feeling is
Your
when you,
tax commissioners, I believe, Dan, you and I had a discussion, a lot of cases, tax commissioners are filing these objections.
Oh, they are?
Just to force the burden back to the widow or widower to be able to prove the need.
my feeling is to get this passed, the simpler it is, the easier it's gonna be able to pass. We can put all these caveats on it, we'll never get out of committee.
Good point.
And what's the time period that it applies? 1 year, 2 years?
1 year.
1 year.
But it can be extended, it says 2 years and beyond?
1 year. That drop dead in 1 year.
And can it go beyond?
The way they can
Well, it
have
says it
multiple
can.
years actually written off would be the fact that the person did not pay their taxes and you didn't have an aggressive collection system because it's either the taxes in the year of death or the taxes in the year of the filing. And if there's any other outstanding taxes at that point in time, they have to be wiped off too. So if somebody's sitting there with 3 or 4 years worth of back taxes that have not been paid and they die, they're gonna get all those wiped off. And if the lawyer's smart enough, he'll file for taxes in the following year, and you can wind up getting 3 or 4 years written. But the intent is the year is 1 year is what the intent is, but.
Could apply to more than one.
Years if you have delinquents involved.
Joe?
there may be one significant issue to keep in mind. To the extent we're talking about an ad valorem tax exemption, do keep in mind, and this gets to your point about the simpler the better, the constitutional standard for repealing an ad valorem tax exemption is a 2/3 vote of each house of the General Assembly and then approval in a statewide referendum. So just keep that in mind. This is not a matter of simply going into Title 43 and making a few line changes.
So you're saying to change anything in this code? Even if we,
Not anything in this code, but to the extent that the year's support set aside provides for an ad valorem tax exemption, whether it's on homesteaded property, a tract of 100 acres, or a vacation home, or anything, there's a constitutional standard that has to be met to get rid of it.
so whatever change we make, we're gonna have to have
To the extent it applies to ad valorem taxes.
well, going back to what the recommendation is, which is to make this only apply to homesteaded property.
Yeah.
That would require a statewide referendum to do that?
I don't know, Clint, they just changed it, what was it, 2008, Sean, the last change, and they took off personal property at that point in time. It used to apply to all personal property as well as real property, and I don't believe that was something that
Surprisingly, no one's challenged.
But he might be right, but I mean, that's something.
That's something we'll have to look at. Obviously, that's a pretty high hurdle to try to get it on the statewide ballot.
Widows for, you're just putting a limitation on it.
Right.
And the constitutional amendment may be written so general that the legislation can do almost anything.
says reduces or repeals.
And if you're gonna take it that far, do you wanna just eliminate it altogether?
Right, okay. Wade?
What was the reason we couldn't set, as this gentleman said, an acre requirement?
Repeat that question again?
What was the reason we could not accept an acre requirement on that?
Well, I think that the point that was made is an acreage requirement but tied to income producing property. And then the point was made that how do you determine if it's income producing or not when things such as growing pine trees are not income in any 1 year, it may take 30 years. But no, it could be, I mean, if we're limited to homestead exemption, obviously it could be the home and the 5 acres surrounding the home, that you could limit it.
You got several properties that are on our county, you got a home with 200 acres,
Sure.
and they got horses, but they're not for sale. They're just there, they're not really, they're there.
Well, the proposal that so far is out here on the table is to allow them to have whatever acres they have that home's sitting on, included, but this committee would have to decide whether you'd want to put an acreage limit, like a 5 acre or whatever acreage limit, which then would mean they could default on the property that's not around the home. It's just a policy decision this group will have to make. Well, again, we're going to bring this topic back up, and I'm going to present you with a draft statement at the next meeting. But also before the next meeting, we're going to check on the legality of what it would take to get this done, and maybe we can check with Legislative Council at the General Assembly, and because if it is a statewide ballot and